The doorbell rang once. Sharp. Sudden. Like a warning shot in the middle of a silent battlefield. Emily Hastings looked up from her glass of red wine. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her phone was face down on the table, untouched for hours, and the neighborhood had long since gone quiet. The kind of hush that makes every small sound echo louder. It was late, just after 10 p.m. Not late enough for it to be considered alarming, but late enough to make an unexpected knock feel off. She hesitated. Daniel, her husband, was still out. He'd texted an hour ago saying he was grabbing drinks with a friend from work, nothing out of the ordinary. She almost ignored the bell, thinking maybe it was just a prank or a delivery for someone else. But then it rang again. She got up slowly, crossed the hardwood floor barefoot, and opened the door. Nothing. No person. No car engine driving off. Just the quiet hum of suburban peace and a soft breeze fluttering the edge of her nightgown. And then she saw it. A single manila envelope on the welcome mat. Unmarked. But something about it made her skin prickle. Emily knelt to pick it up, and that's when she noticed it. The smear. The color. The unmistakable texture. Blood. Not dry. Fresh. Still sticky on her fingers. Her stomach turned. She dropped the envelope on the hall table and backed away from it as though it might explode. Her breath quickened. Logic tried to reason, maybe it wasn't blood. Maybe it was paint. Ink. Anything else. But she knew. Something deep in her gut told her this night had just cracked open something far darker than she was prepared to face. She went to the kitchen, wiped her hands quickly, and returned. Carefully, like defusing a bomb, she opened the flap of the envelope and pulled out its contents. There were 2 items. The first was a photograph. Black and white. Slightly faded. Not old enough to be ancient, but not new either. It was her wedding photo. She remembered the moment it was taken, well, she thought she did. But something was wrong. The angle was strange. It hadn't been captured by the photographer they'd hired, or even a guest. It looked like it had been taken from far away. Through trees or some sort of obstruction. As if someone had been spying. And then there was Daniel. Her husband. In the photo, he had one arm wrapped around her waist, kissing her softly on the cheek. It should have been romantic. Sweet. But he wasn't smiling. He wasn't even looking at her. He was staring directly into the camera. Cold. Unblinking. Almost menacing. A chill crawled down her spine. The second item was a note. Folded once. Thick paper. Handwritten in a messy scrawl that looked rushed. Angry. Or afraid. She unfolded it slowly. 5 words. You don't know him. Run. That was it. Her heart pounded. She read it again. And again. Her mind flooded with questions she didn't know how to ask. Was this a joke? A prank? Was someone trying to scare her? Was it connected to the inheritance? The inheritance. Her Aunt Rose had died 3 weeks ago, leaving Emily, her only surviving relative, her entire estate. She'd always known Aunt Rose was wealthy, but she hadn't understood the scale until the lawyers explained it. Multiple properties. Art. Stocks. Cash. Daniel had taken the news surprisingly well. Supportive, even. But now, with this envelope, she started to replay every conversation. Every glance. Every night she thought he came home late from work. Her hands shook. She picked up the photo again, holding it under the light. There was a date written on the back. July 14, 2017. The day of their wedding. 8 years ago. In the countryside. Intimate. Family only. Or so she thought. So who had taken this? And why send it now? The door creaked. Emily spun around so fast she dropped the picture. It fluttered to the floor. Keys jingled. Daniel was home. She had minutes, maybe less. Her mind raced. Should she hide the envelope? Ask him directly? Pretend she hadn't seen it? She stuffed the note and photo back into the envelope and shoved it into the drawer beneath the hall table just as the front door opened. "Hey, babe," Daniel called out casually, kicking off his shoes. "Why are all the lights on?" Emily forced a smile, trying to slow her breathing. "Couldn't sleep." He walked over and kissed her on the forehead. "I'm starving. Didn't get much to eat at the bar. You want anything?" She shook her head. "No. I'm good." He didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He smiled like he always did, went into the kitchen, and started rummaging through the fridge. Emily stood frozen in place. "You don't know him. Run." Those words echoed in her skull. Over and over. Who would send something like that? Someone from Daniel's past? An enemy? An ex? A mistake? She hadn't asked many questions when they first met. Everything with him had moved fast. Love at first sight. Whirlwind romance. Marriage within the year. She'd trusted him, let herself believe in the fairy tale. He was charming, attentive, protective. Too perfect. Now, standing in the hallway with blood on her fingers and her heart in her throat, she realized she didn't know anything about the man making a sandwich in her kitchen. She didn't know where he really came from. What he did before they met. What he was capable of. And now, she wasn't sure she wanted to find out. 1:17 a.m. Emily sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone in hand, staring at the screen. The envelope was tucked into her coat pocket. Daniel had fallen asleep watching Netflix, his usual post-bar ritual. She had Googled every version of his name. Searched court records. Checked news archives. Nothing. But then she opened a private browser and searched something else. How to know if your spouse is living under a false identity. The results were unsettling. Tips on checking old tax records. Comparing birth certificates. Watching for red flags. Like unexplained absences, lack of childhood photos, reluctance to talk about the past. Suddenly, her world tilted sideways. She realized, she'd never met any of his relatives. Not one. He said his parents had died in a car crash. No siblings. No close family. And she'd believed him. She felt sick. Just then, her phone vibrated. A blocked number. One ring. Then silence. She didn't answer. A minute later, a text came through. No name. Just a number. And a single message. He's not Daniel. Check the box in the garage. Her hands went numb. There was a box in the garage. One she wasn't allowed to open. Daniel had said it was just old tax stuff, and had warned her not to mess with it because it's all sensitive paperwork. She hadn't thought much of it, until now. She tiptoed out of the bathroom, grabbed her keys, and slipped out to the garage, making sure the door didn't creak. There it was. A dusty, locked metal box under the workbench. Small enough to carry, but heavy. The lock was cheap. She pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside? Passports. IDs. Photos. None with the name Daniel Hastings. One was from Canada. Another from Belgium. All different names. Same face. Her husband. Or whoever he really was. And beneath the stack of identities, a flash drive. And a small black notebook. She flipped through the pages. Names. Dates. Locations. Most crossed out. Some circled in red. A list? A hit list? Suddenly, the garage light snapped on. Emily froze. Daniel stood in the doorway. He looked at the box. Then at her. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared. Like he did in that photo. The garage was silent. Too silent. Emily stood frozen beside the open metal box, the contents spilled out like the guts of a secret long buried. Her fingers still clutched the small black notebook, its red-ringed names burning into her skin like curses. Across the room, Daniel, if that was even his real name, stood in the doorway. Backlit by the kitchen light. Arms hanging loosely by his sides. Expression unreadable. His eyes locked on the notebook. For a full 5 seconds, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. Emily took a step back. "Emily," he said, voice calm. Too calm. "Put the book down." She couldn't answer. Keyboard.ording. And she hesitated. She could walk away. Start over. Be free. But then what? Live the rest of her life not knowing what happened to him? What they had? She turned around. And walked away from the gate. Back into the terminal. Back to the danger. Back to the truth. 1:30 a.m. The rain pattered against the windows, a steady rhythm that matched Emily's racing thoughts. She sat at the kitchen table, an untouched cup of coffee in front of her. The plane ticket was still in her hand. A bright, glaring reminder of the choice she had to make. Her phone buzzed across the table. It was a message from Daniel. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." She stared at the screen, feeling the weight of his apology but unsure if she could trust it. Could she trust anything about him now? The past 24 hours had been a blur, everything she thought she knew about her life had been shattered into a million pieces. The man she married, the man she trusted, was a stranger. A killer. A spy. And the worst part? She still loved him. That truth, twisted and painful, gnawed at her insides. If Daniel had been part of her past, part of a world of lies and violence, did that mean she was now tied to that world too? She wiped away a tear and stood, pacing the room. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't pretend that nothing was wrong. But what would it take to escape this nightmare? To live a life free of this dark web that Daniel had dragged her into? The knock on the door was soft at first, hesitant. Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. Who could that be? It was well past midnight. She turned towards the door, hand trembling. Another knock, this time louder. Without thinking, she moved to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. She stepped back, bewildered. Had she imagined it? The sound came again. More insistent this time. Emily's heart slammed in her chest. She backed away from the door slowly, terrified. She hadn't seen anyone, no figure in the shadows, no headlights outside the window. The house felt suffocating, the walls closing in around her. Her hand shook as she reached for the phone again, but before she could dial, the knock came once more. Bang! The sound was deafening. Emily's pulse quickened as her mind raced. It had to be someone connected to Daniel's past. Someone who knew about the secret he'd been hiding. But who? Was it one of his enemies? Or had he been followed? Emily's mind was in chaos, but her legs moved on their own, following him through the narrow kitchen to the rear exit. She could hear him breathing hard, his grip tight around her wrist as if the world was closing in on them both. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, trying to break free of his grasp, but Daniel's hold was unyielding. They found the footage, he said, his voice strained, urgent. They know you know. We have to disappear. But I don't know anything. Emily protested, still trying to make sense of what was happening. All I know is that you've been lying to me for years. I don't know who you are anymore, Daniel. You don't get to just pull me into this mess. He looked at her, eyes wide, desperate. I know I lied, Emily. I was trying to protect you. I never meant for this to happen, but you need to understand, the people I worked for? They don't care about us. They'll burn everything down to get what they want. We can't stay here. You said you were done with that life, she yelled, her voice breaking with emotion. You said you were out. I thought I was. Daniel's voice cracked. He was starting to lose control, and Emily felt a deep, sinking sense of dread wash over her. But they don't let you go. You don't just walk away from people like that. The back door swung open, and the sound of tires screeching outside froze them both. Emily looked over her shoulder, her heart racing. She could see the headlights of a car racing down the driveway. Her mind screamed, they found us. Daniel shoved her toward the basement door. Go, he barked. Hide. Now. Emily didn't hesitate. She ran down the stairs, heart pounding, as Daniel followed behind her. The door to the basement slammed shut just as the car screeched to a halt in front of the house. She could hear voices now, muffled and distant. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, but one thought kept repeating over and over in her head, they found us. They know. The sound of heavy footsteps thudded across the floor above her, and she clutched her chest, trying to steady her breath. Her fingers scraped against the cold concrete of the basement wall as she moved deeper into the shadows. The small, dim room was barely lit by a single bulb overhead. Daniel had said she was safe here. But was she? She looked around, searching for any way out, any escape route, but the basement was small, filled with old furniture, boxes of forgotten belongings, and the faint smell of dust. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sound of a door slamming upstairs. Emily! Daniel's voice shouted from above. Stay hidden. Don't make a sound. The footsteps above grew louder, closer. Her breath quickened. She didn't know what to do. Where to go? The door creaked open, and she could hear muffled voices, a man's low growl, a woman's sharp, authoritative tone. She couldn't make out the words, but the presence of multiple people in the house sent panic coursing through her veins. Her hands shook as she grabbed the edge of an old dresser, silently opening it, hoping to find something useful. But it was filled with nothing but dusty blankets and old records. Her ears strained to listen. Footsteps. Closer. Then a voice broke through the heavy silence. Daniel's not here. Emily's heart stopped. The man's voice was cold, calculating. She moved quickly, her feet carrying her to the farthest corner of the basement. She squeezed behind a stack of old crates, trying to stay as still as possible. She held her breath as the sound of voices echoed louder, closer. No sign of him anywhere, the woman said. We'll find him. He's not getting away this time. Emily's blood ran cold. They were after him. They were after both of them. And she had no idea what would happen if they found her. 3 a.m. The basement was silent again, but Emily didn't dare move. Her pulse raced in her ears as she waited, listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. She felt like she was suffocating down here. Trapped. Minutes passed, then hours. Time felt like it was warping. The world outside the basement seemed distant, like it was happening to someone else. All she could think about was escaping, getting out of this mess alive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard footsteps once more. But this time, they were lighter. More cautious. It was Daniel. Emily, he whispered. You're safe. Come on. She exhaled, relief flooding her system. I didn't want to bring you into this, he said, his voice raw, full of regret. But we don't have a choice now. We have to leave. Leave? Emily whispered back, her voice trembling. You want me to leave with you? After everything? I didn't want this for you, he said. But we're in this together now. They won't stop coming for us. They won't stop until we're both gone. Her mind spun. She had no choice. Daniel was right. They were in it together. Whether she liked it or not. And whatever was left of their love, their future, it was all tied to a life she couldn't outrun. 4 a.m. The headlights from Daniel's car cut through the darkened streets like a blade through fog. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her mind still reeling from the events of the last few hours. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. She hadn't seen Daniel this panicked before. His usual calm, controlled demeanor had slipped, replaced by a quiet, almost haunted urgency. He didn't speak much as he drove, keeping his eyes locked on the road ahead, as if the world beyond the windshield was a dangerous unknown, and the only way to survive was to keep moving. Emily glanced over at him. His knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel, and his jaw was clenched tight. He hadn't looked at her since. Instead, she settled on the one question that had been consuming her mind since she saw the footage. The question she didn't know if she even wanted the answer to. Who are they? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer right away. He glanced at her briefly, his face shadowed in the dim light of the car's interior. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, he spoke. They're a shadow organization, he said, his voice low and tense. They're not a government agency, but they have the power of one. They operate in the background, pulling strings, manipulating people. They're ruthless. Emily absorbed his words slowly, trying to process them. Shadow organizations? Powerful, faceless groups who did whatever they wanted, no accountability. It sounded like something out of a spy novel. But this was her life. It was all too real. Who are they working for? The government? Private clients? She asked. They don't work for anyone, Daniel replied. They're above governments, corporations, everyone. They do what they want, when they want. No one controls them. Her stomach twisted. She didn't understand. But if they're so dangerous, why did you work for them? I didn't have a choice, he said, his voice hollow. I was young. Desperate. They promised power, wealth, a way out of my past. But I didn't know what they really were until I was already in too deep. He paused, his eyes focused on the road, but his mind clearly somewhere far away. They blackmail people into doing their bidding, he continued, the words tumbling out like a confession. They have ways of getting to you, your family, your friends. Your weaknesses. If you refuse, they destroy you. They don't take no for an answer. Is that what happened to Karen Boyd? Emily asked, her voice trembling. The memory of the footage she had watched, the terrified woman bound to a chair, haunted her. Did they make you fake her death? Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel, and his eyes darkened. Karen was a mistake, he said, his voice thick with regret. I couldn't go through with it. I saw her as someone who didn't deserve to die. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like I was when they found me. I thought I could walk away from it all, but they don't let you. Emily stared at him, her mind racing. The man she married was caught in a web of danger, a web he had willingly stepped into years ago. And now, she was tangled in it too. They won't stop coming for you, will they? She asked quietly. It wasn't a question, but a statement. They had driven for hours, passing through small towns and empty highways, the car's engine humming in the background as the world outside remained dark and quiet. The only sound was the occasional rustle of paper from the glove compartment, where Daniel had hidden a folder full of documents. Emily had glanced at them briefly, but she hadn't dared to open them. The less she knew, the better. Or so she thought. They finally pulled into an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. It was run down, with a flickering neon sign that seemed to be on its last legs. There were no cars, no people, just the quiet hum of the wind. Daniel cut the engine, and the silence felt like it had weight. He turned to Emily, his eyes softening for the first time since they'd left. "We need to stay here for a while," he said. "Lay low. They won't find us here." Emily didn't respond. She simply stared ahead, her thoughts scattered. She could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between them like a heavy fog. "I'm not going to hurt you, Emily," Daniel said, his voice barely audible. "I never wanted any of this. But if you want to get out of this alive, you have to trust me." She looked at him then, really looked at him. This man who had once been the love of her life, the man who had lied to her, betrayed her, and yet still somehow had the power to make her heart ache. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," she whispered. "I don't know who you are." Daniel's eyes flickered with pain, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any words. He climbed out of the car and headed toward the small, decrepit building. Emily sat there for a moment, staring at the empty road ahead. It felt like the world was closing in on her, and there was no escape. 7:30 a.m. Emily stood inside the rundown gas station, her eyes scanning the cluttered shelves of old cans and boxes. The place had clearly been abandoned for years, but the dingy interior still held the faint smell of oil and dust. Daniel was pacing near the back, his eyes scanning the documents in the folder he'd pulled from the glove compartment. He looked like a man on the edge, like someone who was trying to hold on to the last shred of control, but knew it was slipping away. Emily crossed the room and stood in front of him. "What's in that folder?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with apprehension. Daniel didn't look up at first. He just ran a hand through his hair, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he sighed and handed her the folder. "Read it," he said. "It's time you knew everything." Emily took the folder from him, her hands trembling as she opened it. The first few pages were filled with names, code words, and dates, nothing that made any sense to her. But as she flipped through, she started to recognize patterns. The name was circled in red ink. Her heart skipped a beat as she read further. Operation Mercury, a list of targets. People who had been silenced, removed from the equation. Subject, Emily Hastings. The blood drained from her face as she read her own name on the list. Her stomach churned. Why was she here? What had she done to deserve this? Before she could process any further, Daniel spoke. "They're not just after me, Emily," he said softly. "They're after you too." 8 a.m. Emily dropped the folder, her mind spinning. Her name was on a list. A list that wasn't just about taking down dangerous people. It was about taking her down too. "Why?" she choked out. "Why would they want me?" Daniel's face was grave. "Because you inherited the money. They want it. They've been tracking you, trying to find a way to use you to get to the inheritance. They thought if they could get to you, they could control me. Control everything." A cold shiver ran down Emily's spine. This was bigger than just a man with a dark past. This was about power, money, and control. And she had unknowingly walked right into the center of it. "They'll stop at nothing to get what they want," Daniel said. "They'll use anyone. Even you." She could feel the weight of the truth settling on her chest, suffocating her. Her life was no longer her own. And the web that Daniel had spun for her was about to tighten around them both. 10 a.m. The small, decrepit gas station was eerily quiet. The flickering neon sign outside cast a sickly light over the cracked windows, as though the world had forgotten about this place entirely. The dusty air inside hung heavy with tension. Emily sat on the worn-out couch in the corner, her head in her hands, staring blankly at the floor. The folder with her name on it lay beside her, its contents now seared into her memory. Her name. Emily Hastings. The one thing she had always considered ordinary, a life that was hers and hers alone, now appeared on a list of people meant to be erased. She was no longer just Daniel's wife, she was a target. A pawn in a deadly game that she had never asked to be part of. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice breaking the heavy silence that had settled between them. She looked up at Daniel, who stood by the counter, staring at the folder in his hands, lost in thought. "I thought I was protecting you," Daniel said, his voice distant, his eyes shadowed with regret. "I wanted to keep you safe. I never imagined they would come after you." "You didn't imagine it?" Emily's heart pounded in her chest. He had lied to her, kept her in the dark for so long. She had always trusted him, loved him. How could he have betrayed her like this? How could he have dragged her into this nightmare? "I can't keep living like this," she said, standing up abruptly. Her voice was steadier now, a mix of fear and anger. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Daniel. I don't know if I can trust you." He flinched, and for a moment, his face betrayed a rawness that made her hesitate. "I'm the same person you married, Emily. I'm just trying to survive, the same way you are. I'm not your enemy. But these people," he gestured toward the folder, "they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." Emily shook her head, the weight of the situation threatening to crush her. "I never asked for this, Daniel. I never wanted to be part of your world, your lies, your—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her emotions were too tangled. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm sorry. But if we're going to get out of this, we need to trust each other. You don't have a choice anymore. They won't stop until they've destroyed everything we've built, everything you've built." His words lingered in the air like a cold wind, and Emily could feel the chill creeping into her bones. He was right. There was no going back. The path they were on had already been set into motion. The choice wasn't whether or not to get involved, it was about survival. 11 a.m. The rain started falling heavily, tapping against the roof of the gas station like a drumbeat, a relentless reminder of the storm they were caught in. The sky had darkened further, and Emily could feel the storm inside her building as well, her emotions a swirling mess of fear, confusion, and rage. "We need to get to the airport," Daniel said suddenly, snapping her from her thoughts. He had already gathered the few things they had in the car, ready to leave. Emily blinked, her mind still racing with everything she had just learned. "The airport," she repeated, her voice thick with disbelief. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Daniel replied quickly, his eyes darting to the door. "Somewhere they can't reach us. We don't have time to waste." She stared at him, unsure of whether to believe him or not. Was this just another one of his plans, another one of his lies? Or was he actually trying to protect her now? "Where exactly?" she pressed, her voice sharper than she intended. "Where will we be safe?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He moved toward the door, his steps purposeful, as if the question didn't matter. "It's too late for explanations. Just trust me." Emily hesitated, feeling a heavy weight in her chest. She didn't know if she could trust him anymore, but she didn't have a choice. She had no idea who else to turn to. "I'll follow you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if this is another lie, Daniel, I swear to God." "I know," he interrupted. "I know." They both stood in the silence for a moment longer, the rain outside pounding harder against the roof. Then, without another word, Daniel grabbed the folder and stuffed it into his jacket before walking toward the door. Emily followed close behind, her stomach twisted in knots. 12:30 p.m. The drive to the airport was tense. The air was thick with unspoken words, but neither of them dared to break the silence. Daniel's hands were gripping the wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. Emily sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. As they neared the airport, Emily's heart began to race. The buildings outside loomed like dark silhouettes against the gray sky. They were close, so close to the edge of this nightmare. But even as the airport's looming structure came into view, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It felt too easy. Too convenient. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but the sense of unease gnawed at her. She had been running from one danger after another for days now, and yet every step felt like she was falling deeper into a trap. "I'm not going to the airport," Emily suddenly said, her voice steady but firm. "I can't." Daniel looked at her in surprise, his eyes wide. "What are you talking about? This is the only way we get out of this." "No," Emily replied, shaking her head. "There's something wrong about this. I don't trust you anymore, Daniel. I can't just follow you blindly." His expression darkened, but his voice remained calm. "Emily, please. We're running out of time. They're already looking for us. We don't have a choice." "Then why didn't you tell me about this from the start?" she demanded, her voice rising in frustration. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were? What kind of life you were leading?" Daniel's eyes flickered with something darker, a hint of anger, but also guilt. "Because I was trying to protect you. I thought if I kept you out of it, I could shield you from this, shield you from them." The truth hit her like a blow. She was too close to the edge now, and she knew it. She couldn't trust him. She couldn't trust anyone. They had both been living in lies, and now the web they had tangled themselves in was closing in, suffocating her. "I can't go with you," she said firmly, her voice calm despite the chaos swirling inside her. "I can't keep living in fear, Daniel. I won't be part of this anymore." 1 p.m. Daniel's car screeched to a halt just outside the airport's terminal. The moment they arrived, a strange feeling washed over Emily, one of finality. She could feel it in the air, the shift, as though a door was closing behind her forever. She opened the door of the car, stepping out and standing on the rain-soaked pavement. The droplets felt like ice against her skin as she glanced back at Daniel, his face pale, his eyes wide. "You're making a mistake, Emily," he said, his voice low, filled with urgency. "I'm not making a mistake," she replied. "I'm taking control of my life." Before he could protest, she turned and walked toward the terminal doors, leaving Daniel standing in the rain, his figure slowly fading from her view. 3 p.m. The airport terminal loomed in front of Emily, cold and impersonal. The rain had begun to slow to a drizzle, but her heart was still racing, faster than ever before. She had just left Daniel behind, left him standing in the rain like a man lost. She had told herself she was done, that she couldn't trust him anymore, but why did the decision feel so final? Was it relief, or was it regret? She stood at the entrance of the terminal, staring at the revolving doors that led inside. Her mind was a whirlpool of confusion and fear. The events of the past few days felt like a dream, a nightmare, really. She had lost everything, her peace of mind, her sense of safety, and, most of all, her trust in the one person who was supposed to stand by her through it all. But she had to make a choice now. There was no going back. She couldn't go forward without deciding what to do. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know where you are. Don't think you're safe." Her blood ran cold. She had been so close to the edge of safety, but now it felt like she was being dragged back into the darkness. They had found her. She quickly scanned the terminal, trying to remain calm. A sense of dread hung over her, a cold weight pressing down on her chest. Could it be Daniel? Had he sent someone after her? Before she could process the thought, another message came through. Meet me at gate 22. Alone. Or I'll make sure you regret it. There was no signature, no name. The text was blunt and threatening, and the implications were clear: they were watching her. With a trembling hand, Emily gripped her phone tightly. She had no choice but to go. Gate 22 was on the far side of the terminal, tucked away in a quieter corner. It felt like the kind of place where things went unnoticed, a place where shadows could linger unnoticed. 3:30 p.m. The walk to gate 22 was like a dream. Her feet felt detached from the floor, each step taking her deeper into a maze of uncertainty. The terminal was nearly empty. Most of the passengers had already boarded their flights, leaving the place eerily quiet except for the muffled sounds of announcements and distant chatter. As Emily approached the gate, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her every step seemed to echo in the empty space, her breath loud in her ears. She reached gate 22 and stopped, her eyes scanning the area. There was no one around. Just the silent hum of the terminal's lights overhead. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down at the screen. You're here. Good. But I'm not done yet. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She turned, searching for any sign of movement in the dimly lit hallway. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She had no idea who was behind this, or if it was someone she knew. Then, the door to the gate opened, and a figure stepped into the hallway. The person was cloaked in shadows, the dim lighting obscuring their features. All Emily could see was the outline of a tall, broad-shouldered man. He moved toward her, and as he stepped closer, the words that left his mouth froze her in place. I knew you'd come. 4 p.m. It was Daniel. For a moment, Emily stood frozen, staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. The man who had been her husband, the one who had betrayed her, who had dragged her into this web of lies, was now standing in front of her in the place she had thought would be her escape. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you do this? Daniel looked at her, his face a mixture of regret and something darker, something she couldn't quite place. I never wanted to hurt you, Emily, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I've been part of something much bigger than either of us. You never knew what was at stake. I didn't want you to be part of this, didn't want you to be dragged into this world. She shook her head in disbelief. Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep lying to me? I thought I could protect you, he replied. I thought if I kept you away from everything, I could shield you from the truth. But the truth is, they'll never stop. They won't stop coming after us. After you. Emily's chest tightened. The truth was too much for her to bear. She had trusted him, loved him, and now she was standing face to face with the wreckage of their lives. But why, Daniel? She asked again, her voice cracking. Why are you doing this now? I came here to warn you, he said, his voice softer now. They know where you are. They've been watching you. They're coming for you. What do I do now? She asked, her voice breaking. What do I do to get away from them? Daniel took a deep breath, his face conflicted. You don't have much time. I've arranged for a plane to take you out of here, far away. You need to leave now. This is the only chance you have. Emily felt a wave of panic rise inside her. She had been waiting for an escape, but now that it was in front of her, she didn't know what to do. She couldn't leave. Not without knowing the full truth. Where will you go? She asked. What about you? Daniel's eyes darkened. I can't go with you. It's too late for me. Then why help me? Emily whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. Why now? Because, he said, his voice heavy, I can't let you die because of me. You deserve more than this. 4:30 p.m. A sharp noise from behind them made Emily freeze. Someone was coming. She turned to look, and that's when she saw them, two men in black suits, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses. They were closing in on the gate, moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the surroundings. The cold fear that had been gnawing at her stomach suddenly exploded. "They're here," she whispered in horror. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the nearest exit. "We don't have time. They've found us." He moved quickly, pulling her through a back hallway that led to a small staff exit. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as they moved swiftly through the terminal. "Go!" Daniel shouted as he pushed her toward the exit. "Get on the plane. Get out of here. I'll hold them off." Emily hesitated, looking back at him. "No. You can't. Go," he yelled, his voice filled with desperation. Without thinking, she ran. She didn't know where the plane was, didn't know how she was going to escape, but she knew one thing: she couldn't stay here. Not with them closing in. She ran faster, pushing her legs to move, until she reached a back gate. The small aircraft was parked nearby, waiting for her. It was her only chance. As she climbed aboard the plane, she looked back one final time. Daniel was nowhere in sight. The door closed behind her, and as the engines roared to life, the plane lifted off into the sky, leaving everything behind. 5 p.m. As the plane ascended, Emily's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She had no idea what the future would hold, or what would happen to Daniel. But one thing was clear: she had survived. For now. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a new beginning.